Hello and welcome back to Rule the Game. In this video I'm going to show you how to play Creature Caravan, a game by Laukat. It's a game for 1 to 4 players, lasts about 60 to 90 minutes, and it's recommended started at age 8. I won't be showing you here the solo version. For this, please refer to the instruction manual, but otherwise we're going through the version that is for 2 to 4 players. As usual, I'll start with the game objectives, then I'll show you how to play the game, and then I'll give you some hints for your first game, and finally I'll show you how to set up the game. And now let's get started with Creature Caravan.
Rule the game.
In Creature Caravan you play a caravan that's trying to move east, trying to avoid zombies or attack zombies, trying to get some treasures on the way, and so on. You see here the main board at the end of a game. You currently only see one player. I didn't put the other players in there because they're all separate from each other, so it doesn't really matter what the other players are doing. We're just going to follow this one player here in teal. You will have a scoring pad that explains to you exactly how to score this whole game, and we'll go through these different steps one by one. First thing that you have here is that your caravan, that's shown here, if it reaches this town here, Eastray, you start over here, if it reaches Eastray, then you get 5 victory points. In any case, you will get as many points as you have moved columns towards Eastray. So in case you have reached Eastray, you will get 25 points, and otherwise it's just less. In this case, I've only got 24 points for this caravan. Then you'll get points for each space that has a camp on it. And as you can see over here, if I have 2 camps on one field, that's just 1 point instead of 2 points if I had the 2 camps on 2 different fields. Next, you'll have the Ember Zombie board up here, where you'll see here where I have my cubes and my color up here, and all the teal numbers, or the numbers on the teal different background. The teal numbers, those give you the victory points. In this case, we have 8 victory points for the Ember Zombie for where the 2 cubes are. Same goes for the market board, where I also have 2 cubes on the 2 different rows here, and again, the numbers on teal are the victory points. So in this case I have 8 victory points from the market board. And then every player also has a number of cards, at the most 12 cards usually. And also here you'll find numbers on teal background, which are the victory points. So here of course you get 4, you can have zeros as you can see, you can even have negative points. And then there are a bunch of them that also have conditions. So for example, this one here, if you have no folk, then you get 11 points. And as you can see, cards have a type or several types, deadly and shy, for example here. And this one actually is nocturnal and folk. So we do have folk, so we don't get the 11 points. This is just a 0. Or you have other conditions like this one, where you get the 8 points if you have 3 or more cards that are shy. I have a shy one here, a shy one here, and a shy one here. So I do actually have the 3, which gives me the 8 points. Or there's one more here where you get 1 victory point anyway, but plus 1 per machine that you have. And in our case, we just have here 1 machine, so we get 1 plus 1, 2 points for this one. You might have also gathered some treasure while you were traveling with your caravan. Those are these little tokens here. You're going to have them with you, the ones that you actually found on your way. You will turn them around at the end of the game, and you will get also here the victory points that are on these treasures. And finally, it is possible that on the way you stepped on some of these zombie fields here, and whenever you step on one, you'll actually get a zombie, an Ember Zombie here. And each of these Ember Zombies that you still have at the end of the game is a negative victory point. You'll add up all these scores, and whoever has the most points, of course, wins. And if there's a tie, in that case, the person who has the most cubes up here on the market board or the Ember Zombie board will win the game. Creature Caravan is played in turns. All the players have exactly 12 turns to move their caravan, and all these turns, all the players play at the same time. At the beginning of each turn, each player takes their dice that they have. It starts with 5. You might also gain more dice, and I'll show you that later. You roll your dice, and you can then decide if you want to re-roll these dice once more if you decide to re-roll, then you can do this just once, and you have to do it with all of the dice at the same time. I did it because my score was too low, not that this is much better. Now during a turn, your main action will be to place these dice somewhere on your player board or on your cards where you have the dice symbols. You also have a bunch of free actions to which we come later. First, I'll show you how to play the regular actions. For the regular action, you see that most of the dice faces here show you a certain number, and that's the minimum value that you're going to have to place on it. So for example, if you want to get these 2 potatoes or bread or whatever it is, this food, you'll have to place at least a 5 on this field, and then you can pick up your 2 food, your 2 potatoes. Cheaper are these 2 fields where if you play a 1 or higher, you actually get a card from the deck. You'll take that card, you'll put it in your hand. I already had a bunch of cards. From the beginning, you start with 8 cards. Now, if you place your 5 here on this field, you would get 3 cards that you can look at. You take them from the top of the deck, you look at them, and as the hand indicates, you can keep just 1 of them. The other 2 will go on the discard pile here, face down. There is no limit in hand cards that you can have. Now, as you can see, the cards also have fields for dice. I'll show you later how to buy cards. That's a free action, so we'll get to that afterwards. What I wanted to show you first is, though, in this case, if you have a symbol like this, what that means is that you would have to play a die here and also pay a food, a potato, to actually do this action. So if you put the die here, you put the potato back in the supply, you'll get a coin. Whenever you've placed the die will remain there until the end of the turn when we start cleaning up again. Next, let me show you here a trade at the market. This up here is the market board. What you trade here is that you trade either coins or bags into bread or potatoes. So for example, if I placed here my 3 die on the trade at the market, I can now trade in my 1 coin into 1 plus 2 into 3 potatoes, and I will place my cube here on top of that column where I just did the trade. I can only ever have 1 cube per column, so I won't be able to trade just 1 coin in the future anymore. The same way you also deal with bags, should you have bags that you could gain, for example, through this action. Now we also, of course, have moving actions, and the moving actions are shown here. But before we get into this, I want to show you some of the free actions that we have. For one, you can always trade in a card for another potato. So you'll take a card, you put it on the discard pile, and you take a potato. Of course, you can select which card you want to discard. You can also discard 3 cards to get a coin. And then the additional action that you have, free action, is that at any point in time you can play a card. Now to play a card, you're going to have to pay the costs that each card has. So here you see 9 potatoes for this card. Some cards also cost you bags in addition or coins in addition. And if you have all the money to pay for a card, let's say I have here 6 potatoes, I will return the 6 potatoes to the supply, and I'll play this card that costs me 6 potatoes. As soon as I put down a card, I can now use this card for any action I want to do. So had I played a card that actually has a field where I can now put a die, if I had a 6 die still left, I could use this action. One more free action that you might have available is that some of the cards will tell you that at each turn you're allowed to do something. It doesn't specify when you have to do it during the turn, so in this case, when I played this card, I could now raise 2 dice by 1. Unfortunately, I only have 1 die here left that I haven't used, so I could increase this one, the value from 5 to 6. Had I had a second one, I could have raised that too. There are also some cards that actually have a condition which makes the card cheaper. So if I had 2 or more machines, as it says over here, I wouldn't have to pay any food, I would just have to pay a coin to place this card. You can also see that this card has an action that he can do each turn, but he can only do this action if you have 3 or more folk cards. And again, this is the type here. This is folk, but I only have 2, so I wouldn't be able to do this action yet as a free action. Some cards also give you an ability at the beginning of a turn. In this case, when the turn starts, you can get 1 card and then discard 1 from your hand. In addition, later on, you can also place a die here, and we get to this action later. Please note that when you play this card, because it's not the beginning of the turn, because you're already in the middle of the turn, you cannot do this turn start action yet. You'll have to wait for the next turn to get this action to be done. Some cards also give you an ability when you camp, and we're going to get to the camp action at the end of the turn, so I'll explain that to you later. But this is also an ability that you have for the rest of the game, while still having another field where you could put a die. Then we also have cards that have a die on here. What that means is that as soon as you play this card, you can take one of the extra dice that we have, you can roll it, and you can still use it in this turn right away, because it's available for you now, and it will be available for you for the rest of the game. Please note that you can have a maximum of 12 cards right here in front of you, unless you have a card that specifies that you can have more than 12. So these are most of the basic actions that you have so far. Now, what you still haven't seen is how to move your caravan. And those are these actions here, where you see a square with different properties on them. What this here means is that if I place my die 3 or higher on this field, I can now move onto a plain field. Plains are all the fields here that don't have mountains or canyons or lakes on them. They can have a tower on them, they can have clouds on them. And so what we do is we move our caravan by 1 onto one of these green fields. As you can see, some of the cards just have one type of terrain on there. Some others have a mixture. In this case, you can select if you want to move onto a plain or onto a lake. Or in some cases, you even have all 4 of them, which means that if you put 2 dice onto these 2 ones up here, you can now move onto any kind of terrain. You will also find on some of the cards that you can actually move 2 fields. So if I put my 6 here, I could move 2 fields, and in this case it doesn't even matter what kind of terrain it is. You can always move vertically or horizontally, even backwards if you want to. You can never move diagonally unless you have a card that lets you do that. There are also some cards that will let you do one move, in this case on plain terrain or on the mountains, and they give you an additional move, but only if you have 2 nocturnal cards, which in my case I actually have. I have one here, and one here, so I have 2 or more. So if I placed my 6 here, I could always move onto 2 fields with plain terrain or with mountains. Now some cards let you do more than one action, like this one here. If you place a die on here, you're going to get to do these 3 actions, and you're going to get to do them in any order you like. You can take a card in the beginning or at the end, you can move to a canyon, and you can move to a plain in any kind of order, but it is important that you finish all these actions before moving on to the next action. I can also skip something. So for example, if I played this now, as you can see, there's no canyon nearby, so I can't actually step on a canyon, so I would only be able to move onto a plain and take a card. So we'll do that. We'll move here onto a plain. Now, as you can see, there's this OX on this card, on this field, which means I have now entered a zombie field. If that happens, I'll pick up one of the zombie tokens. I'll take it to me. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is now a negative victory point, unless I'm going to stay right here and do another action, and that's called the attack action. An attack action has to be done in the same turn when you end up on the field, and you can only attack while you're still on the field where you received your zombie. It does also not matter if you move onto a field and stay on the field, or if you move onto the field and then move away from it. As soon as your caravan hits that field, you get a zombie, and you would have to stay here to now do the attack action. The attack action is very similar to the trade action that we did up here on the market board. What you have to do is you take a die here though to pay for the attack action, and you place the die onto a field that has a knife on it. So for example, I could place it right here, in which case I attack now with a strength of 6. And as you can see up here, I have different strengths that I can attack with. I technically could also actually place my die here, where I have the strength of the die plus 2, in this case 8. So if I attack with 8, I'll take my cube, I'll put my cube up here on this column with the attack strength 8, and I discard of the Ember Zombie because I defeated him now. But it's again same as on the market board. Once you have a cube on that column, you cannot use that column again. So you realize that you will fill up the 5s, the 6s, and the 8s quickly, which means now you're going to have to go to the 9s and higher, which you can only do if you place at least 2 die. And that's why you will play some cards sometimes that have knives on them, so that later, and I know I can't take any dice back, but let's assume I had these 2 dice still available, I could place 1 die here and 1 die here. I would get 6 plus 8, 14 strength in attack, and I could actually place my cube up here. So these are all the actions that you can do during a turn. You place all your dice, you play a bunch of free actions, and then you wait until everybody else has finished their turn. As you have noticed, I've played only with one color so far to show you how this game works. But it's also not that important that you see how the other players play, because they do exactly the same thing, and there's almost no player interaction in this game. Meaning that if you move your caravan on the board here, you can move your caravan wherever there's already another caravan. It doesn't matter. You can end your turn on the same place, on the same space as the other caravan. It doesn't matter. You will start your game on different starting fields, but afterwards everybody can go wherever they want to go without any restrictions. So let's say we have now come to the end of our turn. What happens next is that first we will place a camp on the field where we have our caravan. And you remember, we're going to place 12 camps, and you'll get a point, a victory point for every camp that is on a different field. Next, you will gain a reward for where you camp. Now, I don't actually get a reward, but as you can see, some rewards here are fruit and treasures. For example, in case of the treasure, you'll just take a treasure tile, you turn it around, you see what it has here in addition to the victory point. If it has something else in addition, you'll take whatever it says, and then you put your treasure back down here face down so that the other players don't see how many victory points you have there. If you end up and camp on a field that has a fruit on it, you'll just take another fruit token. Fruit tokens don't have to be played right away, but you can always play a fruit token at any point in time on one of your cards. And if you play a fruit token on a card, it reduces the required value of that die to a 1. So this action now, if I put the fruit on it, is kind of for free, because I just have to play a die on it. It doesn't matter what the value of the die is. Once you've played a fruit on a card, you cannot take it away anymore. Should you camp out on a white tower, the white tower will give you 3 cards. You'll pick those up and take them to your hand. You might also have some cards that give you special abilities when you camp somewhere, as I mentioned before. So for example here, when you camp on a canyon, gain a coin. So if you end up camping somewhere here, at the end of the turn, once you put the camp down, you also take that coin from that card. And now there's one more thing that will happen at the end of the turn. And that is that we're going to look at the market board and the Ember Zombie board, and we're going to move all the cubes that are on the board down by 1. Now you might wonder what the point is of these cubes moving down in the columns. And it's true, after the first round you don't actually realize any difference. But after the second round, we're going to move them again, and they now hit the bottom of the column. When that happens, if there are any other cubes on the same column, they get pulled down to the bottom right away. And as soon as there is or if all the cubes are at the bottom of a column, this column is not available anymore for any player. So that means that the yellow player can now not use an attack with strength 8 anymore. They cannot use the trade with just 1 coin anymore. So as soon as a player plays a trade or an attack, any other player has just this turn and the next turn to do the same action before that action is blocked. And in some cases you don't want them blocked, because it's easy for you to play a 1 or 2 coin trade or do a 5 or 6 attack on the Ember Zombies board. And so you might want to do this action as long as it's still available, which means that you might actually have to readjust your strategy and your moves to be able to do this while the action is still available. And now we're really at the end of the turn. We'll take the dice back, and we start a new turn by first doing the turn start action, as you can see here, and then everybody rolls their dice, re-rolls if they want to, and we move on to turn 2. And so every player plays 12 turns, and they try to get towards Eastray. If you want to step onto Eastray, you just have to move by another plane to get there. You can also step onto Eastray before your 12th turn, but in that case, you can't move any further anymore from there. You still will put camps at the end of each turn until everybody else has played 12 turns. And once the 12th turn is played, then you'll actually look at the score of everybody. And here's some hints for the first game. It may seem as if the goal of the game is for you to move your caravan towards Eastray, and that's how you get your points. That is not really the case. So yes, if you get to Eastray, you get 25 points for moving there, plus 5 points extra for actually ending up on Eastray. True, that's 30 points. But I would say if you just end up somewhere on this last board towards the end, you're doing just fine. It depends on what other moves you make. Because as you can see, if I end up here, yes, I'm missing 3 points for not moving here, I'm missing 5 points for not reaching Eastray. But if I can gather good cards in the meantime, if I can get more of these cards that have 8 victory points, for example, or if I can do some very good trades up here, or even do some battles up here, I can easily regain these 8 points. So it might not just be about rushing towards Eastray, but trying to do these other things too. And I think that's also what you have to consider while you're playing this game. Your strategy depends a little bit on the cards you have, but you should think early on about, do you want to do more zombie attacks maybe? Because maybe you're very strong with your cards on actually having lots of knives, and therefore you can attack many zombies and get lots of victory points there. Maybe you have cards that give you a lot of coins, or they give you a lot of bags. That way you can play more on the market board here, which all gives you a lot of points. Or what you should definitely not forget is that you need to build a good deck here with your cards. Because as I've mentioned in the game objective section, the cards here usually have some sort of condition, especially if they're cards that have a lot of points. You see here, the 8 has a condition, the 11 has a condition, the 9 has a condition, and you need to make sure that you can fulfill these conditions in the best way. In the best case, you have a bunch of cards that give you points when you fulfill the same condition. So you fulfill the condition once, but you get points 3 times. Most points that I have seen so far have come from the cards. The 12 cards, if you can put down the 12 cards or more, you can get more than the 30 points that you get on the board. So play here, play up here, and just make sure that your caravan gets closer to the end of the board. And that's Creature Caravan. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here on the channel again. Up next, how to set up the game. To set up the game, you'll take any side of the start board and you place it right here. You'll then take the other 3 boards, again, any order, any side as you wish, and you place them connecting to the starting board. And at the very end, to the east, you're going to put East Ray. You then place the Ember Zombie and the marker board next to this whole stretch of the main board. Typically, it's actually at the end here. That's where the instructions say. I didn't have the space, so I put it here. Important is that everybody can reach them. And the same actually is the case with all the resources. So you'll put the potatoes here, the fruit, Ember Zombies, the extra dice, also the bags and the coins. They're just next to the board. You'll shuffle all the cards and you can split them into different decks so people can reach them more easily. And you also shuffle here the treasures, put them on a stack. And then you hand every player their player board. You give them 5 dice as indicated here. You give them a caravan, you give them the 12 camps, all the cubes that they have. And with this, we're almost ready to get started. Last thing we do is that you define a starting player, and in clockwise order, every player will then place their caravan here on one of the starting fields in the first column. Here, the caravans can't be on the same space. So here, this is the only time where the order actually matters. But once you've done this, then you're ready to get started with the game.